joined us today. We appreciate it, especially with the weather being nice. It's in the, I think, almost the mid 60s, almost there. So
Oh man,
I know
nice.
for over here, that's pretty good.
That's way good. Oh, and when it's beautiful out there, it's just so beautiful.
Yes,
It
it's a beautiful
is.
area.
Yes, it
So
is.
I'm
Okay.
Megan Ademeyer, and I'm with the Clallam Conservation District. And we have Ken Bevis here today. Bevis, did I pronounce that right?
Bevis.
Bevis, sorry
That's
about
okay.
that. Bevis, here with us today from Washington Department of Natural Resources to talk to us about wildlife. So Ken, yeah, with that, if you want to share your screen and you can
Okay.
take it away whenever you're ready. We
Sweet.
appreciate you being here.
Oh my gosh. Oh, how fun. Well, hello everybody. I'm Ken, as Megan mentioned. Thank you for the kind introduction. I work with the Department of Natural Resources Small Forest Landowner Group. I just let Stan in, Megan, or Sarah, I mean. And we we work with small landowners across the state to help write forest stewardship plans. We work with conservation districts, WSU, as kind of like, I don't know, expertise, technical assistance for your goals as small landowners. And I'm the wildlife habitat guy in that program. And I have a presentation for you today about habitat enhancements. And hopefully everybody can see that now. Megan, can you see the presentation screen?
Yeah, that looks great, Ken. And I forgot to ask you how you wanted to do questions. I did mute everyone.
Okay,
You'll
let's do
notice you're muted.
let's do the chat box and I'll check
Okay.
on it every now and then. Or if you see one that's just totally timely, you're like, hey, wait, just interrupt and jump right in there.
Oh, perfect. Okay. And at the end, I think you said you had some time for questions if
I
folks
think
want to
so.
unmute.
Yeah, we can. I think there'll be a few questions, but
Fantastic.
we'll walk through this and hopefully it'll give you a few ideas about habitat enhancements. So I'm
Great.
going to turn my camera off too in order to save a little bit of bandwidth and just go right through this thing. So Megan, I'm counting on you to say something if something goes sideways, like I blank out or something, because I'll just keep going.
I
Okay.
will stop you. Don't worry.
Okay, thank you so much. Excellent. Okay, if you build it, they will come to your habitat. So I want to speak about habitat enhancements. Remember this movie, Kevin Costner and the baseball field? Well, that is the forestry field of dreams, and it's on Vashon Islands. It's a ball field surrounded by Douglas firs, and at night these guys come out instead of baseball players. We've got woodpeckers and deer and things. But if you build it, they will come. And there's something about wildlife that it really is an emergent property. That's a biological term of habitat. So, wildlife basically means creatures that live outside of the purview of human care, let's just say. I mean, but they're certainly influenced by human activities. But in essence, wildlife is a response to the habitat conditions we provide, and there's lots to that. So here's a little bit about the presentation. I'm going to speak about wildlife itself and the limiting factors. That's whole biology there. Habitat management and manipulation. That's what we do. And then some common enhancements and some of the species that'll benefit from each. And some of these kind of overlap, but here we go. So I always like to start out with you are here. State of Washington, a remarkably diverse place. I should say you are here, except in the world of Zoom, I am here. And when somebody watches it, they're going to be wherever. But Washington is roughly 2/3 naturally forested, and the evergreen state, etc., with the big shrub steppe zone out here in the middle. But 2/3 forested with a lot of variability across that forest. There's about 4.5 million acres owned by the small forest landowners. By the way, this is a commercial for my program, and there's about 215,000 of us who own 5 or more acres of forest land. So it's quite a proportion of the state, and it's in these dark green blobs. So you look, there's quite a bit of it in eastern Clallam County, all the way out here, fair amount in Kitsap, down here in Lewis County, a whole bunch in Clark. Excuse me, lots of small forest landowners in northeast Snohomish King. So this is our clientele. These are the folks that take our classes, that watch our seminars, that we go visit and give advice to. Yeah, we just and it's just the greatest clientele because everybody is really interested in their property and they want to do the right thing. So we try to take them there. Here we are. This is our group. There's our website. If you know somebody with small forest lands or are one, reach out to us and maybe we can help you. So there you go. Okay, so in the state of Washington, there's about 400 species of vertebrates that live in the forest zone, all the way from hummingbirds up to an elk or a moose, with amphibians and reptiles, birds, mammals, pretty remarkable diversity as a reflection of that diversity of habitat. And so there we are with the thing. I just see my friend Noel Nordstrom came into the presentation. Hi, Noel. So about 400 species of wildlife live in Washington's forest, and there's this diversity I was already mentioning. The lowest diversity is in the reptiles and the amphibians. You think about how many reptiles you have in Clallam County. It's really not that many. Maybe a garter snake, a painted turtle. Amphibians, you've got quite a bit. Quite a few of these 26 species of amphibians occur out there in your wonderful rainforest world. Mammals, like 140 species, all the way from shrews up again to the big ungulates, bears thrown in the middle there. Birds have the highest number of species in the vertebrate realm. And by the way, these numbers are for all habitats, not just split out to the forest. But the point being, it's showing where the species diversity is in these different taxonomic groups. And then I just lump insects and mollusks together, and insects, crustaceans, spiders, mollusks being slugs and snails and sorts of things. Lots of species there. So we have a lot of wildlife diversity that occurs in our landscape. So here's the 4 basic needs of wildlife: food, water, cover, and space. And in order for a species to be successful in occupying a home range, which is the place where they get all of their needs met, you got to have all of these things in adequate measure for them to survive and even reproduce. So food, all wildlife has its own particular version of what it eats. Say like a frugivore, like the cedar waxwing there is that a bohemian. The waxwing eating berries. All wildlife has to have water, not necessarily free water to actually get a drink, but most wildlife will get a drink at some point in time. A few species get all their moisture from their food, but most will need water somewhere in that home range. Cover. They need some place to hide when they're not active. You think about that as like food, water, cover. They got to get out of sight because there's predators trying to get them, or they need a place to raise their young when they're really vulnerable. Little baby whatevers have got to be in some safe place. Like this hollow log right here that a Douglas squirrel used not only as a den, I think, but was a cone midden. There were a whole bunch of cones in there. And there's got to be enough room for the creature to do its thing. So here's a hypothetical cougar home range. And actually it's probably not big enough. There'd be like 2 miles by 10 miles or 2 miles by 6 miles butting each other with scent marking. But this would be a hypothetical home range of a wide-ranging creature on the landscape, or a mid-range, a mid home range like this Douglas squirrel could live in this 5 acres of forest right here on this hillside where everything they needed for their whole lives were just right there. Or even a smaller scale, say like a mouse or a shrew or something that lived under this bush and these rocks. Its whole universe was right there just in those 2 square meters. So that's sort of the context. And our properties will be like a little teeny piece of that. So just that. So food, water, yeah, and they all got to be there. I already said this, but they have to be there for the wildlife to survive and reproduce. And it might be, not a very big territory, but it could be a lot bigger. Okay, so here's my only diagram of the presentation, but this is wildlife management in one slide, and it's related to population dynamics. And I hope this makes sense. Noel, I'm going to get your feedback later if this made sense. But this is hypothetical that over time, any population of any species in any given setting will tend to rise at a certain level to a certain point and then go up and down around some level. And that level is determined by the limiting factors, whatever they are. It could be food, it could be food, which would be biotic, it could be predation, it could be risk, it could be abiotic, something non-living like water. Say like for example, if the pond dried up, the beavers might go away because they didn't have water anymore. So sometimes these limiting factors are anthropogenic, meaning human derived. Like a small example would be a wetland with a population of an amphibian species that migrates to the upland, but it was surrounded by busy roads. And when the frogs or the salamanders went out to cross the landscape, they get run over. And that just would essentially eliminate that population where it would no longer be able to exist. So sometimes the limiting factor can cause something to cease to exist, or in management, you can address it and help that population thrive. So the limiting factor concept is a really important element of wildlife management because it's something that we strive to figure out in given times. Okay, so I'm going to speak mostly about forests, but forests are complex habitats in complex landscapes, with different habitat features that are important to the given species. So say like there's a dead tree right there that would be really important, say, to a woodpecker, or a down log that would be important to a salamander. And humans tend to simplify habitats. Our influence on the landscape would be like even in a second growth thin forest, we opened it up, we left the solid healthy trees, the shrub layer is still there, but we took out the snags. We often will remove trees, move them around for harvest or for whatever other reasons. We've done a lot of this stuff in the last many decades, which is even aged crop-based forestry. This stand that was just cut here out near Lake Quinault looked like that. It was like 30 years old and they're starting over. So we tended to simplify the forest there. We tend to remove trees for hazard. We tend to cut them down for, like this was actually a wildlife tree in a park, taken down for safety. So through manipulation, we tend to simplify habitats. But we, the same people that simplify habitats, can sometimes address the limiting factors and provide an enhancement that could fill in that gap where something else changed. And so these are the people that I work with. If you get a stewardship plan, I'll get you one of these signs right here. So there you go. Wildlife, look at that. It's one of the top objectives of small forest landowners, which always makes me very, very happy. So I'm just going to start with something near and dear to my heart. That one limiting factor are dead trees, trees that have stood long enough to get soft enough for the woodpecker to make their cavity excavation hole in it, and provide this key habitat element. Well, the limiting factor action might be to actually create some standing dead trees or maintain them by way of taking the tops out. So lots of the best cavity snags, i.e. ones that woodpeckers have used for their actions here on the landscape, are broken off. There'll be trees that, weather or whatever have snapped below the crown where this woody cylinder continues to exist. And a habitat enhancement technique, frankly, is to take the tops out of trees. A lot of times you can do this with a hazard tree, one that's perceived as like threatening structures or something, and you get your local friendly arborist to go up there, saw it off halfway up or whatever height you can tolerate, take the crown out, rough it up so it looks like it broke, and there you go. If you don't have any, this is an idea. Create some. Use your climbers. So you would remove the crown to reduce the weight so that you, in essence, were mimicking when the tree would snap off. The height, 8 feet minimum, I say 50 feet, which is like half the height of most of a tree, but you remove really 2/3 of the tree so that it lasts a long time. You want the top diameter to be at least 10 to 12 inches because that gives you enough volume for a woodpecker to make the cavity. And this, by the way, is a created snag that has gotten lots of cavity use. And yeah, you rough it up with the saw just a little bit. That makes it look more natural, and it might actually catch more fungal spores to help it rot. So in a safety situation, you would shorten it up to where it just couldn't reach anything. If you were really worried about it tipping over on your swing set, well, then make it short enough. And when they're really short like this, they tend not to tip over. They tend to rot in place. So that's the goal. Here's a great one in Snohomish County where these nice ladies um, had a I'm letting Korean in. There we go. A cedar, and this is happening in Western Washington like crazy. Cedar trees dying from our summer droughts, and they had their local arborist create this habitat tree back in the backyard, and they were telling me about all the woodpeckers that use it. So when you're doing this, don't do it yourself. I love this DIY thing here. Here's the bobcat with the ladder in it tied to the tree, another one tied to the tree. It's like, oh man, don't do this. Use the professionals. However, in Longview, Washington, this squirrel, this is the world's largest squirrel, by the way. It's a wood carving. Look, he's holding a giant acorn. There's a flicker cavity right in the back of this. So that's okay to create a snag as a carved giant squirrel. There you go. You can create snags by girdling. You can actually cut through the bark and make the tree die by way of, and this is a good technique for a thinning project. This was actually done up in the top of a tree, which is kind of cool because it worked. Here's my nice landowner on Ponderosa Pines, and she had girdled this tree. If you're doing a harvest, let's see if this will work. I hope this video will work. Darn it. And this is oh, here it goes. Okay, watch this. So this is a feller buncher machine, which most of our harvest these days is being done with these big machines. And it's good news for loggers because it's much safer. But watch this. This guy created a wildlife snag. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005, 1006, 1007, 1008, 1009, 1010, 1011, 1012, 1013, 14 seconds. Oh, and by the way, this is a big machine. So that's about an 8 or 10 foot high butt log that is going to serve as a snag in the future. And so I always tell people, make this part of your contract, your logging contract, and tell them anytime there's defect in the bottom of the tree, snip that thing off and leave it out there. And you see these around, and they're actually intended as created snags. You can install snags. This one here on the left, I turn my head and I'm looking at it right there. It's right outside my office window. My friend and I brought this ponderosa pine down, dug a hole, put it in. We actually treated the bottom so it would last a little longer, and you'd be amazed at all the birds that like to perch on this thing. This one right here, forestry consultant Phil Hess had a line on some long butts from a sawmill, and he brought them to his place and used a backhoe, dug a hole, and put them in there, and then put gravel around them. And look at all these woodpecker cavities. These have been in there for about 20 years. So Phil was really excited about that, doing that. Yeah, there you go. There's the gravel in the hole. Look at all those woodpecker holes. This is out at Lopez Island in a remediation site, and they installed these snags right next to this little wetland. You never think of an osprey platform as being an installed snag, because that's exactly what it is. So there you go. Yeah, you can put them where you want them. The primary cavity excavators, the woodpeckers, they feed and nest in big dead wood, especially big dead wood, because there's more of a cylinder for the bird to use. So there you go. Nice. Megan, I should just leave these alone. I see them popping up saying they want to come in. I'll let you do that.
However you want to do it. Yeah, I think I admitted everybody. Thanks,
Oh,
Ken.
good. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so these structures are very, very used by these birds. like a pileated, and I throw this in there to show you what a woodpecker cavity looks like on a cross section. They go a long ways down into those standing dead trees, and this is a marvelous habitat, not only for the woodpeckers, but for the secondary species that use them. Like here's one of our common woodpeckers, the hairy woodpecker. Here's the downy, by the way, bird watchers. Downy's the little guy, hairy's the medium sized, look like a robin, black and white, that's a male. One of the very common species that would indeed use your snags that you installed, created, protected. Yeah, and they like to nest in soft wood. So there you go. Nest boxes. Nest boxes are actually imitations of those abandoned woodpecker cavities in the hollow stem. So this snag right here, it's a larch from eastern Washington, but it is full of these woodpecker cavities like I just showed you that cross section. And this is what's inside. My friend Jeff Kozma, the ornithologist, had this is old school now. This just cracks me up. This was 20 years ago, but this was a big deal. It was like a on a pole, a little video camera, and he poked it into a woodpecker nest. So those are helpless baby, relatively newly hatched woodpeckers inside of a cavity like that. Isn't that pretty cool? So there you go. But a nest box imitates that. And a birdhouse is really not a functional imitation of an abandoned woodpecker cavity. A birdhouse, they're fun and everything, but I mean, you see them like this, they can't be cleaned out. The holes are too small. It's like, so don't do this. We'll get to this. So nest boxes are made to certain size specifications. You can make them big enough for a small owl. That's an imitation of a pileated cavity. You can make them excuse me, like for swallows and bluebirds and chickadees. This is my favorite size. That are more or less an imitation of a hairy woodpecker cavity. And so if you're interested in this, I'll give you my email address at the end and I'll send you a really simple set of plans, but you can find them online easy. You look up nest box plans. And so something I always suggest about nest boxes, well, we'll get to that in a second. Lots of species use them. Here's your tree swallow out in your country, the violet green swallow, the red squirrel, the Douglas squirrel. They love these things. It's so interesting how many will be used by squirrels. So here you go. Wood ducks. This is a wood duck project over on the Kitsap Peninsula, kind of near Shelton. I think that's Kitsap, where these female wood ducks using the big boxes there. So the limiting factor could indeed be the absence of dead trees that are big enough, that have stood there long enough to get the woodpecker holes in them. And in many landscapes where we've had intensive management for 120 years, let's say like Clallam County, lowland Clallam County was logged off and turned into farms, a lot of it, oh my gosh, probably before the year 1910. I mean, some of the earliest areas of European settlement in Washington were right there where you are. So the old forest full of those dead trees with all the holes and all that, long gone. The new forest that grew back probably was cut again. And so many cases you will have a limiting factor of dead trees with cavities. So the nest box can fill that gap. Here you go. Excuse me. Oof. A successful wood duck project. This gentleman was really proud of the 3 wood duck boxes next to this little wetland, which actually was an old farm pond. And this is a guard to keep raccoons from climbing up there and reaching in and eating the baby wood ducks. And it worked. So it's pretty cool. He was very proud of the number of successful wood duck nests he had presented. You will find, if you're interested in wood ducks, might have a good place for this project. At the end, I'm going to give you a link that will take you to a good guidebook. Oh yeah, here we go. So these 2 sizes are what I recommend. And one of them is songbird size, kind of like this one. This is for bluebirds. They say bluebird box, but it's the imitation of the hairy woodpecker. And then here's like an owl or squirrel or kestrel size, which is an imitation of a pileated woodpecker cavity. So this one would go in the forest Better if you can put it up 8 or 12 feet, but not essential. Make sure if you mount them to trees, you use aluminum nails or those really long screws so you can find the piece of metal afterwards. You do not want to pound a big steel nail into a tree, because what happens to nest boxes over time? They fall apart, they get neglected. I know we've all seen the ones that were all gray and fallen apart. Well, they probably worked for, 5, 10, 15 years. Then somebody moved, whatever. So you don't want to leave that nail in the tree. These are some of the species that would use this bigger box. There's a flying squirrel. Flying squirrels are famous for using big nest boxes. You got to maintain them. This is something that happens. The weak point on a nest box is the roof, not the sides. You don't have to make them out of cedar. They very seldom stay on a tree long enough to rot. But what happens is the roof splits, dries, whatever. So the roof needs to be either made of cedar, that's a good thing, or with some kind of protective coating on it. I'd like to paint them, or a shingle, not metal, it gets too hot. And many of the songbirds will fill the box with nesting material. So at least every other year, you need to come in and pull this stuff out, and then boom, the box is good as new. I just cleaned mine out about a month ago before the swallows got here. I live halfway between Twisp and Winthrop on the edge of the forest, and I have about 35 of this style nest box out and around our property. And last year, I had a nest of some kind, either a chickadee, a swallow, a bluebird, or a wren in all but one of those 35 boxes. And it's taken about 10 years to get to that, but it's just totally cool. And I maintain them. I fix them. If they break, I put up a new one, but you got to maintain them. So one thing about nest boxes is I suggest you do a series of them, do a project, do 20 boxes, and then every year go check them. It's really fun. They get used. If they're maintained like this one, they can last a long time. It's pretty interesting. They're like old barnwood maintenance. So there you go. They can last for a long time. This is a bat box. Now, bats are cool. Bats are way charismatic. People always ask about bat boxes. Well, a bat box is essentially an imitation of loose bark in a tree. And bat boxes need to have the proper spacing of these baffles, they call them, where the bats can crawl up in here to roost. They're not breeding here, they're coming here to rest during the daytime. I suppose you could get a breeding colony in one of these, but in general, they're for roost sites. They need to be in a place usually near water. You think about where you see bats flying around at night. They're not uniformly distributed across the landscape. They're really focused on wetlands and meadows. They may use above the forest canopy. Noel could comment on that. But in general, bats are localized. And like this box right next to the big Columbia River had tons of use. In fact, you can see that black stuff right there? That's bat poop because of all the bats that roosted in that box. And this one had a whole bunch on that one there too. But often they're not used. It's so interesting. I've had many conversations with people that say, well, I put up a bat box, but I didn't get any bats. Or I always ask, how do you know you didn't get any bats? Did you shine a flashlight in there? Did you look for poop? I mean, when do bats come in and out? At dusk. Anyway, if you put one up and it's not used, wait about 3 years and then move it to a warm, sunny spot and see if that works. And so there you go. Bat Conservation International. I'm going to show you that link too. Piles. So many times forest landowners are doing some thinning. Okay, so I just peeked at the chat here. How deep in the ground was my planted snag? I think like 3.5 feet. It really depends how tall it is, but yeah, three feet, something like that. Tamped it in like I was putting up a sign. And yes, and Noel makes a good point about bats. The water is a place for abundant bugs and getting a drink. Thank you, Noel. So we often find ourselves in land management having a surfeit, meaning a lot, of wood, perhaps particularly in thinning projects. A lot of our medium-aged forest stands are experiencing crowding mortality, or we go in and thin. Well, you always wonder what to do with all that wood. Well, you can make what I call a habitat pile. This is a created source of complexity where all sorts of the smaller critters will use these. It's pretty cool. And the thing with a habitat pile, it's a design criteria, highly, highly technical, but you put the big stuff on the bottom and you make it kind of hollow so that there's caverns in there. So a critter, let's say a raccoon, could crawl in here and use it as a den space. So here's your bottom. Here's the way you might arrange the bottom. And in wet country, about your one, two, three, fourth layer, put the pieces right next to each other so that it's kind of a roof. Then you go with the finer stuff up above and you walk away. It's not a brush pile to be destroyed. It's something that you've actually retained as a habitat feature. Ponderosa pine, Eastern Washington. It can create bug risk in Eastern Washington with ponderosa pine, but otherwise it's really not an issue. Here's one where somebody they wanted to show me their habitat car. And this was a car from the person that owned the land before them. It broke down. They took the oil out of it. And look, it's got moss all over it, and they put the branches over it. I thought that was funny. This is a school kid volunteer project on a private land out on the coast. And watch this. So these kids in a thinning unit were directed to build a habitat pile. Here they go, back and forth. Oh man, working hard. Yep, running around. This was surprising how fast. By the way, this is almost in real time. They were going back and forth. They were proud of themselves picking it up. There's the teacher. And we're almost done. He said, put it right there. We got to make this to spec. Boom, done. Nice, nicely done. So constructing habitat piles is a great family activity, and it does work. It's pretty interesting. And who might use it? Well, in this case, a wren, a deer mouse, a garter snake, a ground squirrel, a chickadee, a tree squirrel, maybe a bobcat. Check that out. Bobcats being a relatively common but seldom seen species in Washington, and they like to use down log stuff. So here you could also make a down log surrogate, segueing here. So that's a down log, in a large diameter natural tree. Here's one. This is actually out by Forks. That's a pretty darn amazing log right there. It's about 5 feet in diameter. But if you don't have big wood like that, you can take smaller diameter wood and group it like this to create a down log surrogate. And what happens is you get these little tunnels in between this thing. You can also do this at the bottom of a habitat pile. So that's kind of the same idea, but a little bit different. Yeah, there you go. There's a down log surrogate for essentially grouping the smaller diameter wood to create some of that large wood function. Oh yeah, here you go. You can do this at the bottom of a pile. Now here's a creative idea. Create a little tunnel right here that would be the den site for that bobcat, and then add stuff to it. And this is, by the way, like a demo starter, but I have never gotten a logger to do this with a slash pile. But Noel, I want you to get somebody to use their machine and build a bear den out of the wood in a slash pile. If you build it, they will come. This stuff will get used. Okay, so your shrub layer is one of the most important habitats in the forest setting, and we don't really think of it like that. The brush is kind of like whatever. We don't even necessarily know the species, but you can enhance your habitat substantially by way of adding shrub species diversity, and in particular learning what the fruit-bearing shrubs are for your area. So here's Melvin. He'll sell you trees and shrubs and things over there by Clallam. And the conservation districts, hey, look at that, Clallam. Megan, do you do a plant sale every year?
We sure do. Yeah,
There you
we
go.
sell almost 30,000 trees every year. So it's
And
great.
do you sell shrubs too? Do you sell like elderberry, serviceberry? I
We
think you
do.
do.
We have conifers, deciduous trees, and deciduous shrubs. So we have about
Nice.
26 different species that we cover.
There you go. So talk to Megan and her colleagues for recommendations. And when you do your planting, add some shrub species diversity and enhancement of things that bear fruit. So we want to favor things that create, because often they're really good browse. And I mean, if you're going to go through all the trouble of doing some diversity, I love this, that so many of them have berry at the end of their name: salmonberry, huckleberry, choke cherry, elderberry. Red elderberry is a really good one for your part of the world. Indian plum, cascara. But there's lots of different ones. So we want to use native shrubs because we know that they have pollinators that work with them. We know that the local wildlife can use it. So that's one of the reasons you use native plants. So one of your assignments is to learn what grows on and near your property, not just on your place, but nearby, like in your neighborhood, because then that could give you some clues as to what will succeed. I've been amazed, and in my work, I have this totally wonderful role where I get to travel the whole state and visit landowners. And I've been surprised at the variability in the shrub species diversity over short geographical ranges. I mean, you don't have to go very far and all of a sudden it's completely different. So learn what grows on your place and nearby. Here's the good stuff: the different huckleberries, salmon berries. Oh yeah. Do you ever go out and when the salmon berries are just getting ripe and you go for a walk one day and it's like, oh man, these are so good. Oh, and you go back the next day and it's like, well, where'd they all go? How come they're gone? Same thing with huckleberries. Actually, Indian plum is notorious for this. Or hazelnuts, the wild hazelnut. Where did they go? Well, shoot, there's all this wildlife that's literally waiting for it to get ripe so they can eat it. When you do decide to do some of this planting, plant to succeed. And that means, maybe you'd use mulch like Julie Sackett did on her riparian planting. You might have to beat back the weed competition, etc. Whatever you got to do, make sure they survive. You might have to use cages or tubes to keep the deer from eating them if you're in a high deer traffic area. So whatever. You want to find out what your worst noxious competitors are. And I put that nasty old Scotch broom. Do you have Scotch broom out there, Megan? You do, don't you? Yeah.
Yes,
Holly.
we have a lot of Scotch broom, way too
Oh,
much.
Scotch
And
broom is,
holly, yes.
yep. Holly is like bad in huge amounts. Himalayan blackberries, oh my God. I like to say if you're going to try to take them on, fight dirty and fight to win, and otherwise just tell them where to stay. Mow around the edge and make cobblers. Ivy ironically creates a lot of platforms for nesting birds and things, but it eventually kills the tree, tips it over. So here's some of your worst ones. Your conservation districts are great sources to help you fight those worst noxious competitors. So here's that shrub layer. Lots and lots of birds use it. Lots of our bigger animals browse in it, but it's still the Rodney Dangerfield habitat type brush. Don't get no respect. I got to do it right. Take my salmonberry, please. That's a play on a Rodney Dangerfield joke. So the brush layer is something to really think about. Food, water, cover. Water sources. Like this is a water feature that I built in my backyard near that snag. Pause for a laugh. That's a joke. That's our state waterfall. There you go. This is Palouse Falls. If you've never been there, check it out. It's totally cool. But that thing about food, water, cover, and a puddle, a pool, an ephemeral or a vernal water source is really what I'm going to refer to here. Because if you have a lake, a river, a stream, then it's taken care of. You're gonna buffer it, etc. But these little sources like this can be tremendously valuable to a lot of amphibians, insects, other life forms. Like this is in an alder stand, and you should have heard all the frogs singing when we were next to this one that day. It could be an artificial source, like this bathtub out in a meadow, or this gentleman near the I can think where that was. It was over on the Hood Canal area, and it was surprising. Oh, near Belfair, it was surprisingly dry. There was salt water about a quarter mile away, and he was like, "Well, I'm really interested in wildlife." He said, "Well, you need see if you could do a water source." Well, this was, oh gosh, probably 100 yards from his house. He said, "I'll fill it up with the hose." He got a stock tank, buried it, obviously, put his trail camera over it, made this cool little ramp for the chipmunks and things to climb out or to go in. I think he should have put some sticks and things, but he got all kinds of wildlife using this in no time. This is mine. I made this one at home. This is just a rubber pond liner, and I don't put water in it, but it's got water in it right now from snow melt, and I put my camera over it, and I've gotten all sorts of things coming down here and getting a drink. This is Mark Beiser over by Shelton. He created these vernal ponds that were actually near an active wetland, and they were separated in order to provide amphibian habitat because there were fish in this pond right here. There's another one. This was a dug pond just down to the water table, surface water. This is a really fancy water feature that this nice lady, I can't remember her name, created. But they excavated, lined, put a liner in it, and in the summertime, there's a pump that bubbles water, and they put their trail cameras over this, and they got tremendous amounts of wildlife use in this created water source. So your best strategy for maximum species diversity is to provide habitat complexity with strategic enhancements where they're needed. But habitat complexity, remember food, water, cover? So these elk right here have got food. They're eating the sedge. They're eating the wet grass. Water right here. Cover. They were bedding down in here. Their whole home range was about 40 acres. This landowner said these elk don't go anywhere because nobody bugs them and they got everything they need down there. So, if you do some strategic enhancements, it'll help. So remember this about wildlife. If you build it, they will come. So here's a few recommendations that we said. There were snags. Provide them, create them, put them up. Just make sure they're out there. Boxes, build them and maintain them. Piles, you can use your thinning material to create those habitat piles that are a cover, food water cover. Log surrogates, which is kind of a subset of that. The shrub layer, pay attention to your shrub layer and even prune them. Even like elderberry that gets really, really big and kind of leggy, you can prune them back just like you would your lilacs in order to create regrowth. And water, food water cover, provide water in some manner. Here you go. Here's your publication sources. So the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife has this really good a website called Living with Wildlife. I'm writing it into the chat right now. Living with Wildlife WDFW website, and they've got all these chapters in there about different things. It's pretty darn cool, and you can find just all sorts of things. Woodlandfishandwildlife.com, that's an article series that I participate in, and we made a series of articles about lots of different topics for small landowners, and so you might check that one out. Washington State University Forestry Extension has a website with oh my gosh, there's this reference library at the end that you kind of got to dig for, unfortunately. But if you wander around in there, you can find it. And they have articles about pretty much anything you can think of: how to get rid of holly, how to build a nest box, on and on. The Oregon Forest Resources Institute, OFRI, is another resource. It's a little bit like WDFW, but it's got a whole lot of stuff in there too. So, say for example, you wanted to learn about bat boxes. Here, let's do this one too. There's Bats Northwest. That's a great organization that has information about bats and bat habitat. Important reminder that we are living in a biological crisis. The sixth great extinction event is happening now, and this is not a good thing, And so one thing I love about small landowners like us is that we can actually help. We can make an important difference by providing habitat on the lands that we control. And how you do it, that's part of what it's up to you. You get to decide. But wildlife is an important objective for most small landowners, and there's many, many tools. I mean, obviously the best one is to provide complex natural habitats of native species, and then so enhancements are on top of that. but we do. We provide habitat, and it makes me so happy to be able to help. I mean, I'm looking out the window right now, and moments ago, this year's tree swallows were sitting on the box that I'd put on the side of my house, actually. So pretty cool. So thank you. Um, Here's my email address. So, if you got a question or a referral, and or say you want those nest box plans, just send me a note and I'll fire it off to you. It's what we do. That was 45 minutes, and that hopefully leaves a little bit of time for a few questions or even discussion. Megan, I almost feel like you could let people show their speak. There's not that many.
No, I think that would be great. Yeah, if anybody wants to unmute themselves, we could have a discussion. And Ken, I was going to say, if you have any website links that you wanted to email me, I will
Okay.
be sending out this recorded version of the presentation to
Okay.
everybody. And also, there's a whole bunch of people that signed up to receive the recorded version.
Oh,
So I
nice.
could include that in the email. And if you think it's appropriate, we could even include the bat box plans that I think you mentioned having.
I have nest box plans.
Or
I
nest
actually
box, yeah.
I refer people to uh, Bat Conservation International and Bats Northwest for the bat box plans because it's really interesting. Bat boxes. Well, somebody's thinking about this, so I'm going to elaborate on bat boxes for a moment. That remember the thing about limiting factors, and maybe Noel could have a comment on this. But bats are looking for a roost site, and a roost site is just a crack. I mean, it's like loose bark on a snag, a hole in a tree, a woodpecker cavity. A shake roof. Lots of people have a story of, oh, the bats come inside of my woodshed. I see them in the woodshed every year. And so I think because they're looking for a roost site, it's not necessarily limiting in many settings. And so bats can find a place and you put up a box and it's like, that's not as good as what I already knew. What do you think of that, Noel?
Yeah, for roosting, the other thing that bats do that they're really particular about is like there's a difference between where they roost and where they might want to have a maternity colony
Yeah,
or
exactly.
yeah. So, and I don't know if anyone has successfully built a thing that I'm not.
The only maternity colonies I've ever heard of and constructed were like these enormous big structures or in a house or something. For the good of the order, Noel Nordstrom is the regional wildlife biologist for the DNR out there in your country. So hi,
Hi.
Noel. Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us,
Oh
Noel.
yeah, I'm glad Ken gave me the invite. That was nice.
I did. I
Thank you.
just fired her your email like right before the presentation. So
And
anyway.
I just was finishing up a really very bureaucratic little
Oh,
thing I was watching, so this is refreshing.
yes.
Yeah,
Um,
this is a great presentation, Ken.
Yeah, it
Lots of
is. Ken,
oh,
you did a
fun.
really nice job. It's awesome.
Thanks. I kind of ramble around in it, but I tried to cram too much information. But those six things are the common enhancements. It's the water source, the boxes, bat and bird, snags, creating, installing, whatever, plantings. God, and I'm going to forget what the others were. Oh, piles, and there was one more. There's six things, and that's what people do all the time. Hey, Away asked the buried stock tank. How is it emptied to clean? I asked that same question, and I don't think he cleans it. I think it just gets all scummy and everything, and it just stays there. And Noel, is that bad? I mean, it's like my little puddle down there. It goes dry in the summer, so I suppose that's cleaning, but it gets a little scummy, and I'm like, well, don't natural puddles get kind of scummy?
Yeah, or they dry up and go away. The one difference, I've never made a pond like that, but it's not up against soil, it's an impervious surface. So
Yeah,
that could be different. It's not like leaching away
yeah,
into the soil, it's all evaporation.
right,
But
yeah,
when you think about critters that use those, in the spring around here, this time of year, the salamanders will, especially those northwest salamanders might like that for egg laying. Raccoons might come and like to wash their hands in it.
yeah,
Frogs might pop in it.
yeah.
Um,
Birds get a drink.
Yeah, a bath or a drink. I don't think, and then the other thing it's going to grow is a whole bunch of you're going to have all your little invertebrates in there
Yeah,
for the good, bad, and ugly. Some of them will be
right.
mosquitoes, but you're also growing a food source for other things that are around. So I wouldn't,
Uh,
unless you want fancy fish in there or something, it's probably fine to just
no,
let it be.
don't put fish because they'll eat your salamanders, even gold
Right, right.
something. Well, and and you I mean it's kind of the bird bath phenomenon. You provide a little water source and stuff comes in it. Like my little puddle with the pond liner, it gets a lot of mourning doves. I actually put my camera over it and I kept getting
Cool.
mourning doves and chickadees that were going down and getting a drink. And the deer would come by too. So Jason asked about habitat pile stories. Any recent? Jason, did I have another one? Because the habitat piles get used anecdotally a lot. And you go see a brush pile, you always see a song sparrow sitting on it or something like that. But Noel, maybe you could help me with this. I don't know of like good scientific, research that said slash piles and such were used in a systematic manner. It's almost all anecdotal. And
Yeah, I don't know of anything scientific or rigor, like a study done.
okay,
They may be out there, but I'm not
I
familiar
haven't
with them.
haven't found it. Jason, there's your master's degree or your PhD. And I do know that I have one, and I live in quail country, admittedly, but I was going to burn it. It was a burn pile, and the quail were in it. And I was like, wait a second. And so I rearranged it, and now you can almost see it. It's like 12 feet across, 5 feet high, and it's hollow. And I actually put I put an old tarp in the middle of and in the wintertime it got snow on it. The quail lived in it. I had like 70 quail living in that pile, and they would come up and come to the bird feeders. Then they'd fly down and they'd go in it. And it was too cool. So that one's still there. I'm actually going to make it a
That's
little
great.
better. Yeah. So I
We
think
have California quail up here. We should try that here.
it would work. It would work. Where I have seen literature about constructing habitat piles is there you go. Corrine says she was going to burn her blackberry piles, but the chickadees are using them. It's true. They use them like crazy. The piles get used like crazy. Food, water, cover. It makes sense. Oh, I was going to say that in the East, it's promoted as a habitat feature for quail. It's like a habitat management thing. They say make these things. And out here, we're always chipping, burning, et cetera, et cetera. We have this really bad habit of wanting to clean up the forest. And so we kind of have to push back on that. That's a good one. Yeah. So, bat boxes are a little bit more complicated than nest boxes because the nest boxes, if you put up a bunch of nest boxes, something's going to use them. In a few years, you'll have squirrels in them. You'll have, the swallows. You'll get wrens, etc., which is pretty cool. So, yeah, go ahead. Hit us with. Oh, we're almost done. Hit us with another question here. Noel, I'm so nice to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too.
You're out in the woods. That's so cool.
Uh, What's really cool is like if I back away, let's see if I can. Oh no, it's not going to do
Oh
it.
no, you're not going nowhere.
Sometimes you can like vanish in it and have a body part sticking out of the screen. Yeah.
Well, I'm just sitting here in my messy office with all of my biological specimens laying
Well,
around
yeah.
back
I'm
there.
in a spare bedroom, so I thought the forest background was better.
Yeah, I turned my fake background off because it takes time. Okay, here, since I'm moving the camera around, see if you can see it. You look out the window. There's the snag. See it right
Oh,
there?
hey. So how deep is that in the ground?
Probably 3.5 feet, and I
Ooh,
tamped
that's
it
it.
in. Well, yeah, actually, it's a shower, but I used a bunch of rocks and a rock bar, and it stood for. And it's not that tall. It's so interesting though, because that one gets so much use. It's just really neat. Yeah. So you just put them in a strategic place, and if it tips over, well, put it back in. Yeah.
Hmm.
Fun. Well, cool. Yeah, food, water, cover, limiting factors, enhancements. There's tons. In fact, it's a little bit boggling. You start to go into your Google search do it on nest boxes, and it'll be talking about all these different size holes and everything. And it's like, wait, 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 wait. That's more information than I need. So yeah, there you go. Food, water,
Yeah,
cover.
if you guys, either of you have any good publications that you think are, less mind-boggling for people that we could pass along when we, send along the link to the recording, that would be great.
Okay.
So,
You know what, Megan, I'll send you those nest box plans. I have
okay.
two that I gleaned from. They're actually from a Minnesota publication, Woodworking for
Oh,
Wildlife, but they're really simple. And one of my nest box suggestions is if you decide to go into it, build them all the same. Because then you can fix them. You'll have spare parts. The side cracks. You say, and you build them with screws. Build them with screws so you can go zzz, zzz, and replace the side, and shazam, you're back in business. So yeah,
nice. It's a
yeah,
great tip. Yeah.
yeah.
And you can send them to Jennifer. I think you have her email address. So feel free to
I
send
do.
them to her,
Okay,
and then she'll get them to me.
cool. Yeah. So I guess I understand that Clallam has one more or two more in this series.
We actually have 3. We have a birdscaping presentation next week, and then a birdscaping 2 to kind of follow up and talk about some of the things that aren't able to be talked about next week.
Nice.
So this will tie in really great, I think, Ken, because it's not so much on a forestry scale, but it's more on a backyard scale. For producing bird habitat.
I want to go to that. I want to listen to that. That sounds great.
Yeah, please check out our website. You can register for it on our website, Clallam CD. We have a little thing on there, forestry and wildlife webinars. It started as just forestry webinars, and then we just kind of realized wildlife is a great topic to include on this. And then we have Glenn doing the forest insects and diseases, I believe.
Glenn Kohler.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, we have a whole team. I'll say this for the good of the order too, that works with extension, works with conservation districts, and our job is to help people with management of their small forest parcels. We give classes through WSU. We have this great, maybe some of you have taken it, called Coached Planning, which is an 8-week night course that covers soils, wildlife, silviculture, insects and diseases. And at the end, hopefully people write their own stewardship plan, but people really like it. And
it's an excellent program for any of you that might be interested in that. You should definitely look into it. We had the privilege of doing that, I think maybe 8 years ago. We sat in on the classes, and it was so informative.
Didn't we do it in person 8 years ago? We did it.
Yes, it was in Forks. Is the one I
nice.
attended. Yeah, it might have been more than 8. I don't know. I've been here so long, it's hard to remember.
Nice. Yeah. So I encourage you, because we have kind of this little, it's almost like a community, and once people tap into it, then it's like, oh, where do I go to find out about root rot or whatever? And we're like, and we'll just refer you. It's pretty, and we're free. I mean, I've had people say to me like, Ken, what I really like about you, and I'm thinking like, oh, you're such a smart guy, blah blah blah. They'll go,
I think you're free.
Exactly. You're free. But the good news for me is my assistance just goes, it's pretty thin, meaning I can't come out and build the nest boxes for you, but I could send you a plan. So, but well, that's funny. That's what it's like, because you're free. Well, I'm not free, thank you. Tax dollars and all that. So, no, we have a wonderful program, and hopefully everybody can take advantage of it. So there we go.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you, Ken, and thank you, Noelle, both for joining on here today. This is excellent. And we have a lot of people that are going to be viewing this recording. So it's great to have. And anything either of you want to send my way or Jennifer's way, we'll get that sent out when we send out the link to the recording.
Thank you so much.
So,
yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Noelle. And hopefully we'll see you next week at the birdscaping presentation.
Yeah, hopefully that'll jive with other stuff I've got going on. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Go enjoy the sunshine.
Yeah.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
How do I get out of here? Help me.
I'm going to end it. I'll just hit end. There you go, Ken. Bye-bye. Thank you.
I'm stuck. I can't get out.